From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez and this is From the South. Colombian authorities have identified the men who carried out the attack on the Santander Police School in Bogota. On Thursday, the attack killed at least 21 people and wounded 65.
We have successfully identified the person responsible of this heinous crime, of this terrorist act. He is Mr. José Aldemar Rojas Rodriguez. He was the one who entered the school at 9:30 this morning in a gray Nissan patrol truck.
Also, President Iván Duque visited the school where the attack took place and spoke about the next actions.
This attack has taken place in a school where there are young and unarmed students. This attack did not only target our security forces, our youth, our police. It is an attack against the Colombian people. This terrorist attack will be punished. We, Colombians, have never surrendered to terrorism.
After that, Duque declared 3 days of national mourning. In the news conference that he gave, he also announced that he ordered tighter control over Colombian borders, as well as over access points to several cities. Security forces have cordoned off that area. The blast at the police school also shattered windows of the apartments in the neighborhood. The Minister of Defense has called it a terrorist attack. And members of the FARC political party in Congress are speaking out against the violence. Roy Barrera, a member of the Peace Commission at the Senate, also condemned the attack.
We regret the evil attack against our police that has cost several human lives. Any terrorist attack is a cowardly act. We want to express our solidarity with the victims. We hope to arrest those responsible and that we don't fall into a spiral of violence like the one we suffered in the conflict 20 years ago.
And following the bomb attack in Bogota, Colombian students and other social movements suspended their planned protests. The students had called their march to demand the dismantling of the ESMAD riot squad. They accused it of using extreme violence against student demonstrations last year. They also want more funding for universities. Other movements are calling for the resignation of the Attorney General. In other news, around 200 people from the latest group of asylum seekers from Central America reached the Mexican border on Thursday. The group entered southwest Mexico around midday and are headed towards the United States. According to Guatemalan authorities, 2,000 people are taking part in this caravan, which departed from Honduras on Tuesday. And a reported 100 people in the caravan were given a bracelet allowing them to enter Mexico. They allow them free movement and work within Mexico. According to migration authorities, 601 bracelets have already been put on members of the migrant caravan.
I thank the Mexican government, which has helped us Hondurans every step of the way, offered us a card to remain in the country of Mexico for a year.
The mission I have with my son is to get to the United States, but let's see how things go.
Meanwhile, authorities in El Salvador are trying to discourage the members of the migrant caravan headed towards Mexico of trying to enter the U.S.
There are no opportunities to enter the United States at this time. They have already been clear that they don't want South America. As we know the risk that exists, we're asking them not to expose themselves to dangers and to protect the children.
Salvadorans have marked 27 years since the peace agreement was signed in Mexico, ending its long-lasting civil war. Let's hear more of this story.
Hundreds of Salvadorans attended the commemoration of the signing of the peace deal that ended 12 years of armed conflict in the country, which left thousands dead and missing. Diplomats from countries that supported the peace negotiations also attended the event.
That day, on January 16, 1992, we ended decades of repression and pain. We left behind an era marked by a cruel dictatorship that sought to silence people with violent and inhumane methods. Today, we honor the legacy of the peace pact that allows us to enjoy a better today and look into the future with both hope and optimism.
The celebration was meant to reaffirm the commitment of all Salvadorans to democracy, peace, progress, and development.
We already have the guarantee for people to fully exercise their rights, the freedom to have opinions, to decide, to organize, to build any project. This is important for the thousands who fought and died for these values. They didn't die for nothing, and it is for coming generations who aspire to build a more democratic future.
In a festive mood, songs were performed in honor of the peace achieved 27 years ago, and they celebrated the creation of a new, more advanced democracy.
To become a country that is permanently built on democratic values. That is what we, Salvadoran people, wish from the depths of our hearts. We are people who suffered a lot to build democracy. It cost us 100,000 lives and the destruction of the productive infrastructure of the country.
With the support of the United Nations, many sectors of Salvadoran society seek to bring a second generation of agreements that will tackle the new economic and social challenges the country is currently facing.
In Spain, the leader of the left-wing Podemos party, Pablo Iglesias, says he has a split with the co-founder of the party, Íñigo Errejón. Iglesias made the announcement after Errejón said he would stand for election as part of a new political project, along with the mayor of Madrid. Errejón insisted this didn't mean he was leaving Podemos, but Iglesias said he would have to leave. Relations between the two founders of Podemos have been tense for several years.
This morning, Íñigo Errejón has called me to inform me that he is beginning a new personal political project with Manuela Carmena, with a new electoral brand. A few minutes after the call, Manuela and Íñigo's letter was circulating throughout all of the media and social networks. Manuela and Íñigo had hidden the fact that they were preparing to launch their own electoral project in the Madrid community, and the fact that they have done it by surprise. I believe that our members deserve some more respect.
Meanwhile, Errejón said the decision had to do with the need to win wider support.
Everyone recognizes that there is a need of an alternative candidate, a change of attitude. We need to attract all those progressive and democratic people who feel abandoned or are tired of the current way things are going. I think that what worked to win the mayor's position in Madrid can also work to win in the regional assembly.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. In Brazil, 30 students were arrested on Wednesday at a demonstration against a rise in public transport fares in Sao Paulo. One of them is still being held. The police blocked the march and fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the protesters, and Telesur witnessed the repression.
By 6 in the evening, the Avenida Paulista was under siege. The police stopped anyone from passing. As in the previous demonstration called by the Free Fares movement, a conflict broke out over the route for the march. The students were just about to announce the route when the police started firing and making arbitrary arrests.
We were peaceful and they started pepper spraying us. We were just sitting there. Nobody was making any trouble and they came at us firing tear gas.
Students, journalists, and passerbys were also hit by rubber bullets and caught in the tear gas. About 30 students were arrested. And on social media, many people complained of police harassment and insults against the students and journalists.
This bullet here was lodged in the leg of a young guy on a bicycle. He wasn't doing anything, and those pigs shot him in the leg and he was bleeding badly.
In spite of the repression and the rain, the Free Fare movement continued with its second march of the year. They are protesting against the increase in fares from 4 reales to 4 reales 30. An increase that coincides with President Bolsonaro's cut in the minimum wage.
This increase is above inflation. It's wrong. It shouldn't happen. It's the second increase introduced by Doria, who was mayor and is now the governor. It's important to protest so people know that we can only change things by struggling.
The police violence came just a day after the Brazilian president signed a decree to relax controls on gun ownership, a belligerent measure that does nothing to solve people's economic difficulties.
You don't have to be a genius to see that things will get worse. Violent deaths will increase. Housewives and heads of Households don't need weapons. We don't need them. That's what the police are for.
The repression began before the march even set off, a clear violation of the right to protest. In response, the Free Fair movement is calling another protest for next Tuesday.
Social organizations in Chile have called for a march on January 27th to reject the recent approval of a bill that regulates the country's immigration policy. Promoted by the government of Sebastián Piñera, the project controls arrival and residence as well as the departure of foreign citizens. Social organizations warn that the project does not solve the needs of the migrant population, and they say it increases inequality and slows the process of migrants' integration. A court in Ecuador has ordered the release of 5 former public officials and journalists accused of embezzlement. The public prosecutor's office found no evidence to support the claims. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has the details.
Judge Silvia Sanchez has ordered the release of 5 former employees of the Communication Ministry, popularly known as the COM. According to the judge, there was no strong evidence against them. The workers had been accused of embezzlement. A controller's report reveals the COM's criminal responsibility for expenses and hiring. 2 of the defendants are Marco Antonio Bravo, former Undersecretary of Institutional Media, and Javier Lemos, former Administrative Coordinator.
It looked like they were forced to act after Fernando Alvarado fled in order to demonstrate they have to obey the law and fight against corruption, and we paid for that circumstance. The decision from the prosecutor's office was arbitrary and without doubt political in nature.
Lamentably, we were in prison for 77 days. There are 2 people that are still there waiting for the process to finish in the same way as it has with us, which is that it reveals the truth. It's good that we're out and we're with our families, but it doesn't feel good to have been in prison.
The legal team defending Marco Antonio Bravo and Jaime Lemos affirmed that political pressure generated by the case meant that the ex-SECOM employees were accused without any legal foundation.
If they want to bring charges against my clients, then they ought to do it without preventive detention. There is no reason to ask for incarceration, and it's terrible to be detained for 75 days. And then at the end, they recognize that there was no participation in the SECOM contracts. It goes against the rule of law. First of all, you investigate, then if there are charges to be brought, act. That's what should happen. Not prison first, investigate later.
It's a dangerous precedent. The court is jumping to preventative detention as a first course of action. It's a bad precedent to set in the state at a judicial level. There are going to be international consequences for the country.
Judge Silvia Sanchez ruling against the 5 former officials came following the escape of former Communications Secretary Fernando Alvarado, who fled the country in October 2018. The pre-trial hearing for a number of once prominent figures in the ministry is expected to be held on January 23rd, including Fernando Alvarado, former Communications Secretary, Pablo Llanes, former Undersecretary of Communication, Galo Pacheco, former Undersecretary of Institutional Media, and Carlos Bravo of the Gota Sur Production Company. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Equatorial Guinea and China are strengthening bilateral relations. On Thursday, the president of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Nguema Basago, met with a special representative from Chinese President Xi Jinping. The 2 countries pledged to strengthen bilateral cooperation. President Nguema said Chinese companies are welcome to invest in the Central African country. Puerto Ricans protested against a deal created by the government to tackle the island's growing public debt.
Hundreds of people gathered in front of the federal court, which prompted police to close a section of the Chardin Avenue. Spokespeople for various social organizations present at the event hailed the demonstration as a success.
What the United States is doing to Puerto Rico is too intense. It is just too much when we face debt, a fiscal control board, and the whole federal court. We look at the damage it will cause if what they propose is carried out. We have had 40 years to pay the debt, and it will definitely eliminate the possibility of Puerto Rico becoming a free and sovereign nation.
Was the federal judge responsible for restructuring the Puerto Rico debt evaluated whether they would ratify the agreement between the government and COFINA creditors, protesters outside the court condemned the deal and its consequences for the people of Puerto Rico.
This is real resistance, in which one action comes after another. People are seeing their family and friends on the street protesting for the first time. People are waking up to how the deeds of the junta and the colonial system have affected their lives, pockets, and future opportunities.
This clearly shows how what is happening in the country is completely ignored. There's misinformation. More than 200,000 people are affected by these agreements. All sectors are going to be harmed. Teachers, students, the police.
Independence activist Salvador has strongly criticized the U.S. measures against Puerto Rico. He says there's a hidden geopolitical interest for controlling other Caribbean regions and Latin America, especially Venezuela.
Puerto Rico is realizing that colonialism impoverishes you. They say that there is a dictatorship in Venezuela, even though the president was elected by a majority of 4 million. Here, there is a fiscal control board that is deciding the next 40 to 50 years of pensions, universities and schools that nobody voted for. Which one? The dictatorship? It's a dictatorship of the United States. And that's why what's happening is important for Venezuela, aside from us being Latino brothers, as with the Cubans and Dominicans. The United States is setting foot in the Caribbean, into Puerto Rico, so that they can have a frontier from which they can prepare troops to overthrow the elected and constitutional government of Nicolas Maduro.
As part of the demonstration, civic, political and social organizations prepared pamphlets to explain how these agreements about the Puerto Rico debt are designed to benefit the United States and the members of Fiscal Control Board.
Pilgrims are arriving in Panama to see Pope Francis, who is visiting the country next week. Worshippers are getting ready to meet the pontiff, many of them young people. They sang and danced at their arrival to capital city, Panama City. They are preparing for the World Youth Day, which celebrations will take place from January 22nd to 27th.
I hope to reconnect with God and to get to know myself. I hope to share with people from other countries. I think it can bring a lot of unity and a lot of peace to our country. A lot of unity and a lot of peace, that is what we want in our country.
And a group of nuns are getting ready to make Pope Francis dance during his visit to Panama. The band plays pop rock music and is called siervas, or servants. They are practicing for a performance at the World Youth Day celebration. The group's videos have millions of views on YouTube and millions of hits on Spotify and also on iTunes. The band has members from Chile, Japan, Ecuador, China and Costa Rica. And now to the UK. Theresa May's government is still in deep crisis, despite surviving Wednesday's no-confidence vote. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete brings us more from London.
The ayes to the right, 306.
This Wednesday, British Prime Minister Theresa May narrowly won a motion of no confidence, which took place one day after the rejection by Parliament of her government's Brexit agreement with the European Union. In normal circumstances, May's defeat by 230 votes, the greatest loss in British history, would have resulted in her resigning and a general election being called. But the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist leader of the Labour Party, as the UK's next Prime Minister, has caused concern in the British establishment.
I think there is a very high chance that if we go to a general election, Jeremy Corbyn would be in number 10 at the end of that. And that is precisely also why I think that the British establishment is very much against a general election, why the government currently is very much against a general election, and why ultimately a lot of members of Parliament, possibly even inside of the Labour Party, are against a general election.
Sectors within the Labour Party, including a significant number of MPs, have been accused of subverting Corbyn's leadership. When he first became Labour leader, the media and the political right often painted him as inept and buffoonish. Now he is more often than not portrayed as a dangerous extremist.
What they did was massively underestimate the political alienation of the population at large and how ready and waiting they were, essentially, for a committed politician that would represent their interests.
In the current political conjuncture, Corbyn is in a difficult position. A section of his supporters voted to leave the EU, while another influential group voted to remain and are now demanding that Corbyn call a second Brexit referendum.
Ordinary people in this country don't really understand what Brexit represents and what it involves, partly because the elites in this country and the so-called political experts in this country have very little understanding of what's happening and what's going to happen. It's just very, very unclear.
The uncertainty surrounding Brexit and the profound political crisis in which the Theresa May government finds itself means there is a generalised sense of unease amongst the population as to what the future will hold. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. Media representatives in Ghana are condemning the killing of an investigative journalist. Ahmed Hussein Suale was shot 3 times by men on motorbikes while driving home from work on Wednesday in Accra. During the press conference, a fellow journalist demonstrated against the silencing of his colleague by covering his face with a mop. Hussein Suale had helped uncover corruption cases in football. He was part of a team that produced a documentary exposing 77 referees and revealed that Ghana's soccer chief had received bribes.
We also appeal to His Excellency the President, Nadu Dankwa Akufo-Addo, as the head of the executive arm of government, to take personal interests in seeing to the bottom of this matter. Furthermore, we call on Parliament as representatives of the people to take the necessary actions that would instill a sense of safety, not only in the media, but also among the general populace of Ghana. We also urge the judiciary to deal mercilessly with anyone found guilty of such heinous crimes.
2 people have been arrested in connection with Tuesday's terrorist attack in an upscale hotel in Kenya. The Kenyan Police Inspector General Joseph Boynet informed the media that 3 victims had yet to be identified and 5 of the attackers had been eliminated. He also provided a revised number of people killed, bringing the total to 21. He said the new bodies have now been retrieved from the scene of the attack.
In subsequent investigations by the DCI, we have arrested 2 individuals whom we have very strong reasons to believe facilitated the attack and are in our custody assisting the police with the investigations.
The African Union is concerned about the continued post-electoral crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Leaders gathered this week to discuss the disputed presidential election that declared opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi as the winner.
Although the situation on the ground has fortunately remained generally calm so far, it is highly worrying. To put it bluntly, serious doubts about the conformity of the results proclaimed persist and continue to haunt the minds of Congolese and their brothers and friends around the world.
Meanwhile, the chairperson of the African Union, Paul Kagame, has said the comments made by foreign observers and governments have worsened the post-electoral tensions. Kagame said that outsiders must stop interfering and give the African Union a chance to find a long-lasting solution to this crisis. The meeting was attended by 16 African leaders. Workers have taken to the streets of Tunisia to demand a raise of salaries. The one-day nationwide strike stopped rail, bus and air traffic. At Tunis Carthage Airport, most flights were cancelled and check-in counters were closed, leaving travelers stranded. The strike was the biggest since the assassination of political politician Chokri Belaid in February 2013.
After 8 years, as you can see, today all sectors like transport, education and healthcare are underdeveloped. Nothing is left for the Tunisian people but to fight. Thank God a Tunisian workers' union was formed. Whatever anyone says, this is the final option that the Tunisian people have to defend themselves. We took to the street today because it is a symbol of freedom, which has witnessed a gathering of many, many workers and employees.
With that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're also on social media, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.